Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Nomofsky. On today's episode, we're discussing capital markets, exchanges, and women-led public companies. So speaking of, what are the challenges faced by women-led public companies right now?
I think it's that, again, it's the perfect storm of women-led companies being such a smaller percentage of the companies out there and being such a smaller percentage of the capital being raised by those companies out in the public markets. So it's, again, consistent with how do we raise the money? How do we tell the story? How do we, get over some of the historical biases that still might be out there in terms of the firms that are working with public companies and then those women-led companies who are dealing with, venture capital firms or firms that are investment banks that tend to be a lot of male-dominated teams who are making the decisions around who they're going to raise money for, where they're going to invest.
And there have been so many women in the financial industry trying to change those biases. And sometimes it's almost like it's never going to happen.
It's a long arc, right? But it's bending towards where it needs to be.
Slowly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a long arc, but it is moving in the right direction. And it's obviously not feeling like it's moving as quickly as any of us would like, but it's getting there.
No, let's hope so. So I want to talk about why the numbers of women executives continue to be low. There's a lot of smart women out there, a lot of women with CFAs, a lot of women that are running companies. Even though there's been so much going forward these days for women, we're out there. However, the numbers for women executives are always low.
Agreed. And I think, again, it's looking in particular at the details, right? The percentages tend to stay fairly flat, but because there's increases in the number of companies, et cetera, the actual raw numbers tend to be going up, offset by, I think you've discussed this before on your show, women leaders are leaving the industry in record numbers. And the real challenge is we don't have the depth of the pipeline behind of women coming up to take on those roles for a whole host of reasons, right? Mm-hmm. The pandemic was part of it. The definition of capital markets and do people understand that there's a whole lot of breadth of opportunity for women there in different roles to be in capital markets and work their way towards those leadership positions.
I think you just touched upon something that's really important because we have interns that come in from all the business schools and they all have been focused on being an equity analyst. And they don't understand that there are so many other roles out there for women. And I don't know whether they don't teach it in university, they don't know that these roles are there for them. But I find that everyone's focused on becoming an equity analyst, but there are so many other roles for women in finance.
Absolutely. Not just in, finance or at an asset management firm, but at those advisors that assist companies in going public, the investment bankers, the accounting firms, the lawyers, they all play a role, and there's all very big roles for women to play in those opportunities. And like myself, for instance, I'm the financial officer, which is another role that is needed in every company that's going public.
Absolutely. It's an important role as well.
It is.
So as a female leader in a traditionally male-dominated industry, how do you see the role of women evolving in finance? So this is kind of the next step of what we just talked about.
Absolutely. And it is a nice segue because it is very much making sure that we inform those women who are coming up and in university and graduating about all those opportunities that are available to them, and have mentors and education sessions and ability to have exposure for them to have exposure to all of those various roles. And I think it's going to happen.
It's interesting that you just said mentors because practically every woman that sits in that chair talks about mentorship and talks about the importance of having a mentor. And I don't know whether the next generation coming up actually understand mentorships.
I think that's a great point. And particularly for those who have gone through a lot with the last few years with the pandemic, they haven't had that opportunity to be exposed, whether formally or informally. And I think it's important to make sure that we dust that off and make sure it's available for those folks.
I think so too. And I think when we come back, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about, increase of number of women going into capital markets. But I think one of the key things too is we need to be able to make decisions. Whether they're right or wrong, it doesn't matter. You still need to make a decision so that you can move on and learn from it. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more capital markets, exchanges, and women-led publicly traded companies.